please let us know if you have any questions about that. We would love to help you that, but I think it should all be working at the moment. Before we start, I would like to introduce myself. I am Floris van Dedem. I'm a junior analyst at Climate & Company, and I will be moderating this webinar. And without further ado, I would like to officially welcome everyone to the webinar, The Importance of Corporate Disclosure. We hope to shine some light on the ongoing discussions surrounding corporate disclosure, especially with reference to biodiversity. This webinar series is part of the Germanwatch project G7 G20 Track 2 Dialogue, which is financed by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. The project aims to assist the dialogue between civil society actors and political decision makers in order to strengthen the cooperation between governments in the G7 and G20. And therefore, we focus on the G20 presidency that Indonesia has held this year. But it's also important to talk about issues in Indonesia because it's one of the key suppliers to the EU. For more information about this project, please find the links in the chat. We would also like to thank our partners in Indonesia from the Climate Change Center, from the Institute of Technology in Bandung. This center is the foremost research center of climate change in Indonesia, and it has extensive experiences with various international organizations, and gave advice to regional governments, national governments, and local governments in Indonesia. And they have been a great support in the providing us support with the organization of this webinar, and we'd like to thank them for that. Lastly, I would like to introduce the agenda for today. As you can see here, you see all the different speakers and their speaking times. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail now. We'll be introduced speaker before they start. I would like one thing though.
Floris, I don't know if that's my internet connection.
Just open. So if any questions, please to put them in the chat. And they. Oh, is everything back online now or?
Yes, a bit frozen, I think.
Okay. Maybe it's better if I don't share my screen, which I just stopped. Please let me know. Yeah. Well, luckily I'll stop talking soon because Katharina Brandt will introduce kind of a couple of things that she learned during the COP27 that just happened, and look forward to the CBD COP in Montreal next month. The floor is yours, Katharina.
Thank you very much, Floris. So good morning from Berlin and good afternoon to all of you in Indonesia. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone and to talk with you today about international biodiversity disclosure legislations. We at Germanwatch, we have been to the COP27, focusing there on climate negotiations, and me especially on forest protection. And as you all know, forests are crucial for climate protection as they are important carbon sinks. It is estimated that they absorb nearly 1/3 of all carbon emissions and are home to around 80% of the animal species living on land and providing livelihoods for around 1.6 billion people. Nevertheless, every year around 10 million hectares of forests are cleared globally, with Brazil being the country with the highest deforestation rates. worldwide, with around 2.5 million hectares, which have been lost annually, followed by Indonesia, Bolivia, and Congo, with losses of around 0.5 to 0.75 million hectares annually. The EU is, after China, the world's second largest market for forest risk commodities, so agricultural goods especially causing deforestation. And that is why German Watch, we are working together with Climate & Company and many other organizations on identifying and advocating for EU policy approaches that effectively reduce deforestation in global supply chains. And I had the great opportunity to follow the discussions, negotiations, and announcement at the climate change conference in Egypt 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and there I've been focusing on supply chain policies and international disclosure policies to halt deforestation and therefore biodiversity loss. And that what has been very positive was that the importance of forest conservation for climate protection has been finally acknowledged by emphasizing in this year's cover decision the importance of protecting and conserving nature and ecosystems to achieve the Paris Agreement, and that stating that parties should collectively aim to slow and reverse forest cover and carbon loss. Also, several voluntary initiatives have been launched or strengthened during the COP27, amongst others, the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership, that committing also to provide further 4.5 billion for reducing deforestation and promoting forest conservation. Not at the COP27, but during talks preceding the G20 summit, the world's biggest rainforest nations, among others, of course, also Indonesia, together with Brazil and the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have launched a new formal partnership, the large rainforest nations partnership, to cooperate on forest preservation and to negotiate a new sustainable funding mechanism for helping developing countries to preserve their biodiversity. This has all been very positive, but our expectations are much higher on the outcomes from the CBD, the Biodiversity COP, taking place in December in Montreal. There we expect that mandating deforestation conversion-free supply chains will be a major topic. And especially because out of these 21 action targets in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, Target 15 is especially relevant for halting deforestation, as it addresses businesses and financial institutions and requires them to align their activities with biodiversity conservation. So Target 15 is about any government action, being it legal, administrative, or policy measures, to ensure that all, or at least significantly increased number of businesses and financial institutions regularly monitor, assess, and transparently disclose their dependencies and also impacts on biodiversity along their supply chains. And it also foresees legal responsibilities for infractions such as penalties, liability, and redress for damage. I should also mention that deforestation rates, they have dropped significantly in the last years, with the highest reduction in deforestation to tropical forests observed in Indonesia of decreased by 25% in 2021, which with similar rates, and also in Malaysia, making Southeast Asia the only region in the world on track to end the harmful practices by 2030. But globally, in 2021, deforestation rates slowed down only by about 6%, which is well below the 10% needed for halting deforestation by 2030. And this is why action is still needed. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the exchange with you and to your experiences in halting deforestation and by making supply chains more transparent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katharina. Very interesting to lay the link between the COP27 and the upcoming COP in Montreal for the biodiversity. I would like to introduce now the next speaker, also Katharina. She is an analyst at Climate & Company, and she works on topics of international sustainable finance, hoping to enhance transparency on sustainability-related matters. She studied economics in Beirut, Seoul, and Berlin, and briefly worked for the German government and the DIY. Today, she will give an overview of the international landscape of corporate disclosure and explain what role it can play to protect climate and nature. Take it away, Katharina.
Thanks, Floris. It's an honor to be here, and let me share my slides now. Yeah, thanks again, and good morning, good afternoon. For the next 10 minutes, I'm happy to speak about corporate disclosure and its relevance for biodiversity and also in general, and look also forward to your comments and your questions. Let's start with the relevance of it. The real economy is undoubtedly responsible for significant impacts on the environment, for example, by emitting greenhouse gas emissions or bringing nature into stress. Transparency on these issues can help the financial market to better identify risks and harmful investments, what then leads to a more efficient capital allocation, less environmental harm. So transparency through corporate disclosure is the basis and the preconditions to shifting the trillions. A quote by management theorist Peter Drucker summarizes it very well. You can only manage what you can measure. And this shows that disclosure is the basis for all other actions you can take to face environmental challenges and to balance risks. And why nature specifically? To come only with one statistic here, I could refer to many more. There's an alarming biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation due to human economic activities. 1 million species are at risk of extinction. And this is highly relevant for the financial sector because it is highly exposed to nature loss. To come with one statistic here, a study by the World Economic Forum and Swiss Re found that half of GDP is produced by sectors highly dependent on nature. And the financial sector is now increasingly acknowledging that this is relevant and that this is a threat. For example, central banks increasingly indicate the threat to nature loss to the financial stability. However, let's come now to current developments in biodiversity and also to sustainability standards in general. Already in the late 1990s, the Global Reporting Initiative, short GRI, here called the Origin, was founded and developed sustainability disclosure standards, which are ever since one of the key disclosure guidelines for companies. Also, many governments introduce disclosure requirements, and I will come to these a bit later. Sometimes these also build on the work by GRI. But the demand and guidance on these issues has further risen, and new standard setters have entered the field. And I want to speak shortly about 3 relevant initiatives here, also with regard to biodiversity disclosure. First, the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, short EFRAG, is currently developing the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which will be the basis for corporate reporting for over 50,000 of companies in Europe. And these standards are for all environmental objectives, meaning also for biodiversity. Then in parallel, the International Sustainability Standards Board, newly founded at COP26 last year, aims to develop a global baseline for sustainability disclosure. However, they start with climate. And then more focused on nature is the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, the TNFD, which is also currently working on disclosure recommendations. Can expect concrete recommendations next year. And these highly built on the TCFD recommendations, which have been around for some years now. And yeah, I referred to them again before. Despite these developments on the standard setters, there are also some mandatory requirements on reporting nature or biodiversity aspects from governments. However, they are still in its infancy and there are hardly specific mandatory requirements. I want to bring up 2 examples here where there are already mandatory requirements to report on biodiversity issues. And one is the Brazilian accounting norm. And then the second one, the Indonesian regulation for listed companies. And yeah, these are first steps to bring more transparency into these issues. And now, taking the international perspective again, and the COP15 was mentioned before, and I would also like to close with some words on why the COP15 is so crucial also for corporate disclosure. So there, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework should be adopted, and this should be the Paris moment for nature and biodiversity. And Target 15 has also been, this calls for biodiversity disclosure of impacts and dependencies. The final text still needs to be negotiated. And then, of course, there's also crucial that there will be a good follow-up. On the one hand, comparability of disclosed information needs to be ensured, for example, through standardization. And then, of course, it needs to be transposed into national law. But nevertheless, it would be a great sign and a big step forward, this adoption of Target 15 to foster transparency and bring more transparency into nature-related impacts and dependencies. Now I would like to thank you again. Thank you for listening. And I would like to hand back to Floris.
Thank you, Katharina, for providing this clear overview of this quickly developing landscape. I'm sure there's many things that are still to be said about this. So if any of the attendees have some questions about this, please feel free to add them in the Q&A. Before that, I would like to introduce the next speaker. This is Desi Adariani. She is a lecturer and the head of the postgraduate program at the Department of Accounting at Universitas Indonesia. And she recently published a book on sustainability accounting. She has done a Bachelor of Accounting and a Master of Management at the Universitas of Indonesia and a PhD at Victoria University. Today, she will talk about sustainability reporting and green taxonomies and shed some light on these things from the Indonesian perspective. Daisy, go ahead. Excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Floris, and also all of the committees for having me in this important event. Sorry, can you hear me clearly? Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you. I will try to share the screen first. Sorry. Yeah. Oh. Okay. So for the next 10 minutes, I will be talking about the sustainability report and green taxonomy, initiation of biodiversity disclosure from Indonesian corporation and government. So as Floris has mentioned before, so this is the specific context in Indonesia and what we do in our postgraduate program in accounting. So as has been explained by Double Katarina previously, there are mega diversity countries in the world, and Indonesia is one of the country with biodiversity species. And we have to, all of the stakeholders, we have to protect the environment, including the biodiversity. And because of the, in our campus, we also did several research in environmental protection, and also we linked it with the sustainability accounting because we are based in accounting knowledge. And I would like to present one of our alumni works in this matter. It is about the biodiversity disclosure of Indonesian companies and the role of the Board of Commissioners. And this is just published in this year. So this is the background of the study. We acknowledge that biodiversity is basis for human survival, and we also know that stakeholder demands for biodiversity information, and the role of corporations and the public sector are really important in this matter. And we know that the disclosure of biodiversity is one of the environmental categories in sustainability reports. And in Indonesia, it has been regulated in the POJK 51. It is the authority of the regulation of authority of financial statements, and hopefully it will be in the accounting standards, following the standards from ISSB. For the biodiversity disclosure, I know that GRI, Global Reporting Initiative Disclosure Index, have been globally applied by many companies, and we can know that there are several indicators here. For instance, the company or the organizations are suggested to disclose the location of the company's operations, and then disclosing the significant impact that the company has made, and also disclosing habitats and species. So following, sorry, maybe this is not very clear. Following the
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. The slides are still on the first page. Is it possible?
Maybe I don't
also open them in full screen just to make it a bit more visible for the participants.
I think if I open it in full screen, then it will be frozen again. So maybe just like this, if it is okay. I'm not sure what happened. Okay. It's okay, Floris. Is it okay now?
Would be great if it's full screen, but if you think that not work, but I think right bottom corner you can just press it and it should be in full screen, right?
Yes. Okay. Or maybe I just off camera first, so that. Wait a minute. Okay. I hope the slide will be move on.
No, we have the same issue. Maybe Yeah, maybe zoom in a little bit, and then we can do it like this.
Yeah, okay. Okay, if there is some interruptions, then just inform me later. Okay, so following the GRI indicators, sorry if this is not very clear, but you can read it later in our paper. We try to evaluate the disclosures of Indonesian corporations based on previous research indicators. So we found several indicators from previous research, which is more detailed, yeah, and demand more, I think, demand more information rather than what has been expected from the Global Reporting Initiative. For instance, that you can see from these several indicators, I have 3 slides on these indicators that the company should report on the biodiversity. So we can see that there are several, 2 slides. Yes, so there are several information that needs to be informed or disclosed by companies, especially on the specific biodiversity matters. And for the sample, yeah, we have collected several samples from Indonesian companies, and maybe this is not, we have not seen the green taxonomy from the Authority of Financial Regulation or something like that, but we just collect the data from Sri Kehati Index. So this is the index for biodiversity companies in Indonesia. And then the results, so our observations from the sustainability reports of companies included in the Sri Kehati Index, the company's attention to biodiversity issues is still low. So it is indicated from the low score of disclosures. And we can see from the data here, overall the company, yeah, even though it is still low, but we can see that the company is starting to realize the importance of the issue of biodiversity, but still, we still have a long way to go, yeah. While Indonesia is one of the mega biodiversity in the world, yeah, but we know that we still have many efforts to make the awareness of the biodiversity becomes the important matters for the company. And also for the, we can see the results in more detail. For instance, here the theme or topic that starting to be disclosed by companies. For instance, the strategies and future plans on biodiversity, and then biodiversity conservation, engagement and compliance with several guidelines, as well as disclosure of possible financial or legal penalties. So we can see that these are the outstanding themes that are disclosed, that were disclosed by the companies. And we also look at the role of corporate governance. We found that the size of the company's board has a positive effect on the company's biodiversity disclosure. So it means that we can see the association, but we have not found the association between the role of the proportion of independent commissioners and the proportion of women board members. So this implies that we still need to work on the several mechanisms in corporate governance to help support the biodiversity disclosures in Indonesian corporations. And I also would like to take this opportunity to also highlight another important study. This is about the biodiversity accounting, uncover environmental destruction in Indonesia. This is not from corporation context, but from local government. So yeah, I just present the abstract here. So the research took the disclosure of biodiversity report of local governments in South Sulawesi province in Indonesia, and the method is discourse analysis. The findings are very interesting. It is indicated that the informant's impression of the biodiversity report was made to attract investors, yeah, by showing information related to local natural resources, allowing investors to exploit nature as needed. So it seems to be still be treated as a part of tourism. Yeah. And then the implication is that more focus are still needed to naturalization motives. Naturalization motives means that the disclosures are mainly developed or prepared just to create the good image for the local government. And then we can also see that there are discourse and impression which are stated to the stakeholders need to be changed to show the seriousness of the region in biodiversity conservation. And then also from the regulations, we can see that in Indonesia, we have enacted several regulations, for instance, Law number 5 in the year 1990 and also in the year of 2009. We can see here several items to be disclosed, including biodiversity protection in the protected area and also outside the protected area. But the lesson that can be drawn from the findings of the Goa local government biodiversity report is that the information presented does not describe the information needed by stakeholders. So there are still a kind of mismatch. And also the local government tends to embrace the anthropocentric philosophy when making biodiversity report. And it is just the human is the main focus, which is full of the instrumental values. So that the focus is not yet on the environment itself. And then also there are tendencies. I think these tendencies has been still applied from long ago. That they want to create the positive impression to stakeholders rather than increasing transparency through the release of balanced information. So I would like to present the key takeaways that maybe we need local wisdom. I just put it in quote, maybe from Indonesian biodiversity experts. We need the local wisdom maybe to be inserted in the construction of biodiversity disclosures index as part of the green taxonomy, because so far we just apply the global or international standards. So maybe there are local wisdoms that we can be inserted and which shows the biodiversity awareness that has been developed in Indonesia. And also there is the need to increase accountability rather than just an image impression or legitimacy. So it means that the regulations should support and maybe the mechanisms of corporate governance or good public governance to support this. And also maybe we can use machine learning and social media to capture the biodiversity information needed by stakeholders because maybe we can use big data to really know what are the biodiversity information needed by the stakeholders, so that the corporations or the government can better match the information with the needs of stakeholders. That's all from me. I hope that it can be clearly presented. Thank you, Floris.
Thank you so much, Desi. Unfortunately, your slides did not work, but I sent them in the chat. So I hope everyone was able to follow along in the end. It might be that there are some things that are unclear. If you want Desi to further elaborate on this, please ask a question in the chat, and I'm sure we have time at the end to come back to this. And then I would like to move on to Harry Purnomo, our next speaker. He's joining us again. He was also there at the last webinar. He is a senior scientist at CIFOR, researching sustainable forest management, and he has a PhD in forest management and policy. Today, he will be talking about zero deforestation commitments, both from the public and private sector perspective. Henry, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Floris. So I'm here with Sonia Diakusuma Dewi, who helped me to present to avoid something mistake in the presentation. So there's, as Floris mentioned, a zero deforestation commitment. It is a case study from South Sumatra to understand how important the disclosure from public, also private sector. Next one, yeah. So this is content a bit discuss on net volume. I think it is noise becoming our national program related to the environment and forestry as well as other land uses. And the second one is based on the case study in South Sumatra, measuring the impacts of public and private sector commitment to zero deforestation. Because the commitment is already a long time ago, since the New York Declaration on Forest 2014, and we would like to see to measure whether there is impact on that kind of commitment on the ground. Next one. So this a bit on Indonesia net policy that the government has ratified Paris Agreement and submitted to commitment to reduce GHG through national determined contribution as well as enhance NDC and on the follow as the abbreviation of forestry and other land use. We have government, not me, government has a clear idea how to become a zero emission in 2030 in the sector of forestry and other land uses. So net pollution 2030 is a condition where the absorption level is already balanced or even higher than the emission level of the volume forestry and land use sector in 2030. So now everything related to environment and forestry and also other land uses always connected to the very ambitious program from government, follow net zero, and whatever we have now, we try to connect to support the government program. Next one. So the strategy of net pollution, including reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation, increasing carbon sequestration, and also maximizing the use of unproductive or low carbon land for the development of forest plantation and other industrial crop, and reducing emission from fire and peat decomposition by improving peatland management system, and also restoring mangrove. Myself and Sonia work a lot on the peatland and mangrove restoration in Rio and South Sumatra, and then law enforcement. And part of the Indonesia forest and land are managed by private companies through concession, e.g. for large-scale estate, timber, as well as oil palm plantation. Next one. So this is already published, call it Towards Sustainability Ecofactor. This is a way to understand actually who influence the sustainability. It's called public and private commitment followed by action matter to achieve good government and sustainability. And you see, this is a political economy and governance to understand sustainable livelihood. How has structure including demography and also supply demand, institution, technical economy like cost benefit analysis, technique, how to planting technique, how to support the sustainability through actors. And actors, there are we did analysis on actor through the actor-centered power. I think you understand the professor who is Professor from the Wageningen, Göttingen, not Wageningen, Göttingen, and the introduced ACP, actor-centered power. Professor something, I don't remember.
Max
Krot, yes, Professor Krot. So we understand that the central government is a key. It's very powerful in terms of the intrinsic power, coercion, dominance of information as well as the economy. But in terms of network, we found that private companies are key. So both are very, very important. So I think in this session, disclosure from government, public sector, as well as company are key because they have a direct, influence to the sustainability. So this is must do the openness of the actor and see more powerful and less powerful, including farmer, very less powerful according to ACP. But if we talk about networking, farmer is not necessarily less powerful than central government. They have a link. They are even more powerful than district government. Okay, next one. So this is our study in South Sumatra, framing and measuring impact of public and private commitment to zero deforestation with case study from South Sumatra. This is the land uses in South Sumatra and complex driver of deforestation in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The impact of commitment have yet to be analytical scrutinized. So they have commitment, but not analyzed in systematic way. So public sector commitment was assessed by its policy and regulation, while private sector commitment was assessed by its compliance with mandatory and voluntary certification scheme. So as you see, there are concession, natural forest, planted forest, oil palm there, all have a commitment as well as the government. Next one. This is, for instance, the dynamic of in South Sumatra of land uses. If you see, then less natural forest and more oil palm plantation. It's quite and also pulpwood plantation, but this increasing, but in recent years is stabilized the increase of pulpwood plantation as well as oil palm plantation. Next one. And this is public and policy regulation in South Sumatra. The government, provincial government, as well as the regency governments provide different regulation, different local law to ensure sustainability in place. So there are many publications. There is an example of a provincial regulation as well as district regulation. This we have submitted this article to land use policy, waiting for their review. Actually, first review already, and then we revise and waiting for hopefully will be published in the land use policy journal. Next one. So this is also the private commitment. Private commitment through the mandatory like SVLK, and also the voluntary like FSC, RSPO, ISCC, and different. Every company they have commitment to comply with the standard of certification. Both, as I mentioned, mandatory set up by government, something like ISPO, SVLK, PHPL, they are mandatory. But also voluntary like RSPO, ISCC, and FSC. So they are committed in different way in different years. So I see of the 41 companies, 18 pulp and 13 oil palm plantation have mandatory certification. 1 pulp and 6 plantation have voluntary certification. Next one. And this is the public commitment, and we try to hypothesize whether they continue the same or is different, and the public commitment failed to reject. It means that the same before and after commitment. But for private commitment, statistically found that there is a difference before and after commitment. So in other words, private commitment matter to reduce deforestation. But public commitment, we saw there is a decreasing of deforestation, but when we apply a statistical analysis, we reject it if there is a different before and after commitment. Next one. So lesson learned from South Sumatra study. South Sumatra lost, this is 63 of its natural forest between 90 to 2019. Public and private sector commitment do matter. It's very clear. There is a decreasing of deforestation, and non-state actor support the implementation of commitment like academician, NGO, and also donor. And we found sufficient evidence that private sector commitment were able to significantly reduce deforestation from year of commitment to 2019 at a 90% confidence level, top level of public commitment. Zero deforestation commitment must involve radical shift in current policy and practice with stricter law enforcement, combating illegal activities, and transparency to inform progress. Next one, I think this is the last. Okay, thank you. So I'm ready to, if you have any observation and feedback to our study. Thank you, Onya. Onya, before, if you want to add something, Onya?
No, Pak Heri, maybe I just want to add that this manuscript are already submitted to land use policy, and hopefully it can publish soon.
Thank you. Over to you, Floris. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this really interesting case study. I think it is a perfect segue also to the next presentation, because what we saw is that private commitments actually do matter a lot. And that's why we have Teko Triyono here. He is the Sustainability Engagement Lead at DSNG, which is a major palm oil and wood company from Indonesia. He's also a lecturer in horticultural agribusiness at the Polytechnic Willemah Business Indonesia. He holds a PhD from the Australian National University, and today he will give some insights from private company reporting in Indonesia. Teko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Floris. First, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to German Watch, to Climate and Company. By coincidence, we met in Kehati's program months ago, and also to CCC ITB for hosting the technology and also the occasion. What I'm going to present here is not represent our peer industry. So it's mainly purely DSN Group, PT Dharma Satya Nusantara Sustainability Journey. And I hope from that journey, then we can have insight on how company try to commit to all of those regulations, standards, and how we actually come up with a transparency. So let me share screen. Okay, I hope it's okay. Can you see that? Okay, right. So this is just short about the PT Dharma Satya Nusantara, or we can call it DSN Group. It has been established. It was established in 1980s and listed in the IDX in 2016. As Floris has mentioned, it comprises two major business. The biggest is the palm oil plantation. We have 112,000 planted land, palm oil planted land. And we mostly all in Kalimantan, with the biggest in East Kalimantan, about 60,000 in one contiguous area. With the wood product, we have factories in Central Java, and we produce panel and flooring, utilizing Sengon wood, the Albizia, and also Jabon, the Neolamarkia wood for export. So our main export is to Europe US, Canada, and also Asian countries like to Japan. When we are talking about the commitment and transparency, I would like to start from the beginning when in 2012 the SNG started with certification. We started with a RSPO and then continue with ISPO, and we also got the ISCC. What is the key impact was that we have to comply to all of those certification standard. At the same time, we also have to comply to the government regulation. So on the right, you can see that we have to report our biodiversity from HCV, the condition of the forest, to the government, and we have to also reporting as Ibu Desi mentioned in our sustainability report about our biodiversity following as a listing company, we follow the POJK 51. In 2020, that's a major change when DSNG signed up a commitment of impact investment loan, about $30 million from through the Sticking and Green, so we call it and Green Fund, which is Sticking and Green Fund is a company, it's an investment company which is focused on the tropical rainforest conservation. So that's changed our operations, especially in the sustainability part of the work, of the activities. So you can see that the funding behind that and Green, namely Unilever, ICFI, GEF, FMU, FMO, and also the base UK. So based on that, we have to follow what we call the IFC performance standard. So on top of the certification, we have experience through the implementation of the IFC procedure and standard, including the IFC PS6 for biodiversity and conservation. Out of that, we also being assessed by different ESG assessment agency, also by CSO. We also follow the Kehati index because we are listed in IDX, and we check our risk through the Sustainalytics, also part of the IDX. And as a palm oil company, we follow the spot rating. So all of that, all of our work, because it comes through the investor, the investment, the impact investment has to be annually audited by external independent auditor. So other than the auditor from the certification body. And it is published annually. The link is there. If you want to check our last result of the audit, please feel free to access the link. So this is all of the transparency, our commitment to standard related to no deforestation and also to biodiversity conservation. But we have to look behind the scene, what we have to do, what we are doing now, and what we are going to do when we try to disclose following the certification regulation. On the left, we do lots of work to keep our ACV monitoring, the patrolling, getting the data of biodiversity using Smart Patrol, and we reported that annually to the Agency for Conservation and Natural Resources, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And on top of that, because part of our concession have key species in it, so we are trying to live with them, try to combine the conservation and also the work that we do in the production of agricultural commodity. So we do all of the lots of work with orangutan, key species. We work with the local university, local research center, the Ekositrop, and Mula Warman to do the assessment, doing population analysis, and also with the PKSDA to set up the Wildlife Task Force to mitigate any conflict. We also talked to the community about the conservation, and what was important, a part of those investment from N-Green, other than HCP and HCS area that we have to conserve, we also committed to the off-concession conservation area, or we call it OCA. So with HCP, we have 14,000 hectares, but with OCA, we have additionality of concession is 3,543 hectares. Because of the limited knowledge, limited experience, we work with the USAID Segar, and also we work with the local community. We are trying to manage the OCA as part of the conservation within our supply chain. Again, because lots of satellites, many satellites circling us, above us, there is no deforestation that we can cover up. So other than that, we utilize a satellites system to monitor our deforestation as well as the pyrospot. So we work with the Global Forest Watch, and starting from early 2023, we will work with the shuttle engines. So this is all of the work behind the data that we analyze and then disclose to the public regarding to all of those requirements, standards, certification, and others new or upcoming regulation. There is gap and challenge. The biggest challenge, cost, always. We're talking about the cost. So I put the cost not in the list because when we are working in the private sector, cost is number one, checking. But the most difficult part, the second one, is the balancing the community livelihood with landscape protection. Following the standard, following the commitment, we have to do the assessment of ASCV in a partnership plantation, Kemitraan and Plasma. So if we found the HCV area within that, then that part we cannot convert, or we cannot work with them as a Plasma. So this is a different perspective when people looking at livelihood, while we are committing to the legal aspects and also committing to the standard. This is the hardest part. So we work with our CSO partners, Link, Solidaridad, and others to find a win-win solution. We are prioritizing the APIC because we know everybody must know in front, in advance, that we have to deal with a particular standard to conserve biodiversity and forest. The second is the monitoring and reporting requirement. Some of the speakers already mentioned about GRI. We add GRI with SPOT, with Sustainalytics, with the commitment to N-Green. We have the what we call the LPP, Landscape Protection Plan, which is we have environmental return that we have to report it in there as well. And we have the IFC PS6 GN15, for also being monitored and then reporting annually. So other than that, lots of things come up now. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, Target 15, and also the new regulation. So this is what we go through, we experience with since we move into the standardized and also to the commitment, the additional commitment through the investment. We have various reporting standard. We can namely name of them, TCFD, the SBTI, and others we follow. IFRS for the accounting and reporting of our works. But to be able to work on that, the biggest gap is in knowledge and skills. We have to measure the performance according to the standard, according to the certification, according to the requirements. We started with knowledge to HCV/HCS. Now we have to move work and using the net gain as a basis of a performance measure. And then we move again to the species threat abatement and restoration, the STAR, the metrics. And because we are committed to the IFC PS6, GN15, you have to do a critical habitat monitoring. Now, the latest related to the post-2020 is a measuring dependency and impact. So all of this require knowledge, and we are not set up as a research institute or as a university with lots of knowledge and expert. So the things that we can do, we would like to collaborate with academia, with the CSOs, with the local community, as well as with other institutions, can help and have some similar commitment to conserve our biodiversity and the forest within our private sector concession. So that is the things that I hope through the discussion we can get network, we can get the expertise who can help us, and it will complete it or help us in expedite our journey, our sustainability journey to fulfill the natural disclosure. Well, I will end my presentation and I give it back to Floris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teguh. That was very interesting to see how, from a private perspective, companies are actually dealing with all those like measures that are already into place, and kind of also look forward to what is coming up. And I'm sure that all the other experts that spoke today are willing to shed a light on all of these developments as well. And I think we have some time for that now in our panel discussion. Before we go into that, I want to thank everyone for speaking. Really interesting to hear everyone's perspectives. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. I will put the panel discussion question that I showed at the start in the chat, so everyone knows what we're talking about. Maybe for the participants, it would be nice if all the speakers could open their cameras again, if possible. And then I would like to read up the question that we prepared. Is target 15 of the proposed global biodiversity framework an effective measure to combat deforestation? It would be really interesting to see what everyone thinks from all their different perspectives about this question. So who can I give the floor to first? Maybe we can start with the private sector perspective. Teguh, you already mentioned a little bit in your last slide.
Yes, thank you.
What do you think about the upcoming legislation, and how do you look forward to kind of implementing that in the operations that you already mentioned?
Yes, thank you. I will also try to answer the question about the target 15. I've been with the CBD for 8 years as a national focal point from Indonesia for GTI. Following all of this Aichi target and then post 2020 global biodiversity framework, I think what we are, when we are talking about the effectiveness of the measure, we have to ensure that the measure is actually implemented by all of the stakeholders targeted in that measure, in the target. And to be able to check that the reporting, the disclosures requirement, that could help. And also then it could be compiled at the end by the CBD Secretariat or any UN bodies, UNEP, for example, work on that. And then using that as a measure whether the target has been achieved or the measure that they given, the target that's given, actually effective. With all of this new regulation, like the one in EU, we are waiting actually. We are reading on the draft, and then also the one that mentioned by Katarina, the TNFD. I've read that draft and tried to look whether the work that we have done now actually can also meet that. Otherwise, we'll add work and work on top of each other. and that will give us difficulties as well in following the standards. But it is important when I mention about the community, how we have to balance our commitment to follow beyond the standardization or beyond the regulation with what the people needs for their livelihood. This is the part where I think it's limitedly discussed when there is a new regulation or standards being posed or being introduced to the community. So I think that's the part that we need to check. Because if we look at the presentation from Professor Heri and Ibu Sonia, they check in the landscape and the landscape perspective. The people live there. It's not just a private sector, but also the communities as well, the public. So that's the things that we need to check as well. When like a new law in Europe, for example, is going to be implemented to the sourcing countries. So I think that's from my perspective, Floris.
Yeah, may I add, Floris? Yeah, sometimes the problem is not whether it is good or not, but how to do it. The to do it, the traceability, I think it is now the problem, particularly for small scale. Small scale is quite difficult, also costly to report and also assess the biodiversity at both level. Biodiversity can be at the landscape level, habitat, species, and gene level. So it is also some of measuring even the simple one is deforestation. Deforestation is very simple, but it's quite difficult for oil palm sector, for instance, because the majority of deforestation in Indonesia due to oil palm. Now, even it is decreasing. Still about 20-25% of deforestation in Indonesia due to oil palm. But quite difficult to assess who, because some some causes of deforestation sometimes not by formal sector. I think a lot by informal sector. It's not small scale. It's not large scale. Because large scale they are quite the international committee that consumer watch the operation of a large scale, and the very small scale they are afraid to the government. But at the medium scale, 100 hectare, 500 hectare, that owned by local elites, owned by cukong, owned by politicians, it's very difficult. They are not registered. Even if they are registered by someone else, this I mean like this sometimes the most difficult one, not the big one, not the small one, but the medium, and this is illegal. It's not owned really by the owners. So a lot of corruption, a lot of land grabbing actually done at the medium level. This under the radar of government, and sometimes due to lack of good governance, quite difficult. Who own the medium scale? It's not the farmers, it's not the businessman like Pak Teguh, but sometimes government officials, sometimes bad guys from the army, from the university like me. A lot itu Pak. It is very difficult to. There's another actually step, but I agree. I think it's good step, large and small scale to assess and report. But still, whole by a medium scale that informal, but has much bigger than small scale. And if you see, when we talk about small scale, they are not common. You in Europe sometimes imagine small scales owned by the indigenous people, by local people, sometimes not. Small scale, 100 hectares owned by a rich guy on the ground, rich guy. So they are not indigenous, and FNS farmer, they are migrant farmer, not the indigenous farmer. There's rich people from Java, for instance, have land in Sumatra, in Kalimantan, in Papua. Rich guy from Sumatra has a lot of land in Kalimantan, for instance. This kind of economy is happening on the ground. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Floris. Over to you.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question of that, if that's okay. So from what I'm gathering from this is that kind of the large scale and the small scale farmers are, they can fall under the jurisdiction and kind of effectively be tackled by disclosure regulations. But you're saying that medium part is a little bit more difficult to tackle. What would you say would be a solution to tackle those things? Is it things that more like enforcement or more data management or kind of like regulation, different regulation? What is your perspective on that, or any of the other panelists for that matter?
Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of good governance. Good governance, we define the balance of power. Yeah? So we need NGO, we need a watchdog organization, we need those who have a business to raise the issue. Yeah? So I think if the civil society in particular district quite strong, yeah? How to make them stronger, the academician, yeah? Because rely on the government as well as private sector for sustainability only pathway work. Yeah? So also something like that. Yeah, if we talk about oil palm, yeah, 3.2 million hectare of oil palm is located in forest area which are illegal. This is illegal. We have 3.2. This is the number coming from the government actually. And also I realized 2.5 million hectare of oil palm located in the pitland. There's some actually also illegal by government regulation. But how to deal with that? Even government, yeah, there is a lot of money who provide money, how to move people from sometimes from the national park, for instance. So there's a lot of complexity on the ground. So I think it's a need international cooperation, help from you guys and developed countries how to work together. It's not black and white. It's a lot of gray area. If we talk about small scale and inside national parks, some actually very poor, some actually very rich. How to distinguish? If we talk agrarian reform, for instance, sometimes who are ready to manage land, not the poor people, but the rich guy on the ground. Yeah? So yeah, it's a lot of things we need to do to empower government as well as help from research as well as international organizations. Thank you, Ras.
Thank you so much. Any of the panelists that want to respond to this or have another point that they want to bring up? Maybe someone from the public perspective.
Floris, you are frozen.
No, Floris.
Maybe I can take over a little bit until Floris is back. But yeah, just calling if there's any other panelists that would like to comment something else on this question. I think Floris is back as well, so I can send you back the floor.
Yes, thank you. I think connection was unstable for a minute there. Yeah, I was wondering whether anyone had a public perspective or maybe EU perspective to kind of pitch in on the panel discussion.
I just perhaps to add one thing, Floris, that the EUDR now becoming hot debate in Indonesia. EU deforestation free regulation. This will impact the palm oil, coffee, cocoa, timber, and some people mention it's discriminative. Yeah, some people it is good, it's bad. Yeah, so it's a lot of debate. Yeah, from Indonesia as well as I heard also from Malaysia as well, and from Latin America as well. I think it is a hot debate, but I found it is very useful because the sustainability of palm oil and wood is not only depend on the producer country, company, but also depend on buyers. Our study mentioned that a lot of sustainability depend on the green buyers. If you are the buyer, doesn't care about the sustainability. For example, like now, the globally traded palm oil certified RSU palm oil only 26%. So 74% of palm oil traded globally is uncertified. But okay, that's okay. But EU mostly certified, but you see there are China, India, Egypt, Pakistan, a lot of uncertified. So then that kind of things we have to so understand. If you are very difficult to export to your country, a leakage, market leakage, we can export to China and India. And also a matter of investment, if we put very, very difficult criteria for investing land-based work, business, Sime Darby, for instance, instead of investing in Indonesia and Malaysia for oil palm, they investing in Africa, in Central Africa. They move. If difficult in Indonesia, Malaysia, they just move to other countries. So it is. That's why international cooperation is must to avoid leakage. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I think the cooperation between producer countries and countries implementing this regulation, such as the EU, is very, very important. Maybe Desi or Harry or Tegu, do you have a perspective on how the EU is reaching out to companies such as Indonesia that produce a lot of these products when they're developing this regulation?
Yeah, maybe I just want to add something because maybe Pak Teguh or Prof. Harry have a lot more information on the regulation or the practice. Yeah, I would like. I just want to add what has been said by Prof. Harry about the political economy power that we cannot ignore, and I think that even though some regulations have been enacted in Indonesia, maybe the fines and sanctions are really have to be strengthened. But I do agree with what has been said by Pak Teguh, because Pak Teguh is the practitioners in the company. I can see the tension in the company, the struggles, the efforts to try to meet the regulations while in the maybe there are so many regulations either from the EU, such as the TNFD or the other regulations. So that's why in accounting we try to try to accommodate the sustainability disclosures into the accounting standards. Hopefully that it can make the work of the company is easier. Because the disclosure regulations or disclosure demand will be will be made universal, even though there also has been debate in this area, because some might say that the demand of the information must not be made universal, just like the International Financial Reporting Standards. But maybe this is the first step, to make a lot of things easier rather than to follow several regulations, several global regulations with sometimes various conflicting purposes. And I do agree with the as the first step, yeah, for the development of the international sustainability standards, and it will be to be applied by companies, including in Indonesia. Maybe after that we can talk more on satisfying the disclosure or information needs of the other stakeholders other than the investors, because in the first step, I believe that the information is aimed at satisfying the information for the investors, but hopefully that after several times, the needs of the other stakeholders can also be accommodated by the standards. I think that's all, Floris, from me. Thank you.
I just want to go to what Ibu Desi has highlighted. I think harmonizing the reporting, the disclosure among of the standards, certification, and other requirements, regulation, for example, it's a priority at this time, at this point, because otherwise we will go through all of the different standards and try to cope with requirements. One probably requires you to answer and give evidence about hundreds things of your work related to biodiversity and other sustainability activities, and rest of that giving you different questions, which is completely different, and you have to answer that one as well. And that's all go all over months through the year, where we have that probably have to remember that to be able to answer that, we have to do lots of works on the ground, because we don't want to be categorized as a greenwashing. What we have to do is our commitment. We are committed, but to be able to justify that commitment, we have to implement that on the ground. And some of those standards, a new standard, what we would like to see is about the timing, the period that they are going to provide to the countries, to the producers to follow that. It's because some of those activities are really low-hanging fruits. You do it easily, quickly, and then you got the results. You can answer that. But many of those, especially if related to forest, biodiversity monitoring, population monitoring, net gain calculation, the baseline, and others, that will require a longer period to be able to implement and get the results. So that's a thing as well that need to be considered when the new regulation like EU being published. And the second is, with all of the standards, with all of the certification and regulations, actually from the business point of view, we try to get a premium price. The return toward all of those commitment to preserve biodiversity, to preserve the forest, that also can give us opportunity in terms of the business. But then if you go to the spending, lots of research looking the spending goes back to the lower price that we can get. Although like in the EU regulation, and I think in the question and answer, and also in the preamble talking about how young generation in Europe talking about the need of sustainable product, needs of for deforestation-free product and others. But you need to check as well, when it comes to the spending that they want to buy the product, which one they are going to, the premium ones or the normal ones. So that's the thing that also, if we talk about the post 2020 global biodiversity framework, the measurement to be achieved, I think that's the things that we have to look at and compare. If then it comes the needs from the consumer, it comes with the price as well. I think from both sides, from the producer as well as from the buyers, that will go together to speed up the process to get into the target 15 in the global biodiversity framework. But you cannot just look at into from one perspective only, from producers like us or from the consumers only. I think has to be, any regulation has to look at the sides, part of those community that I've mentioned previously. So that's my additional comments to the reporting standard Bu Desi has mentioned, and also regarding to the new law from EU. I haven't looked at that thoroughly. I've browsed that, checked the question and answer, checked the background when they proposed that to be enacted by the European Parliament. But again, there are lots of questions to us in the private sector that we'd like to explore further and see how it giving a direct impact to us and the products.
Absolutely. There are still many questions open, I think. Sadly, we have nearly run out of time. I think, Tego, with your answer, you also answered a question by Azara Putri. If there's any more questions from the audience, speak now, or you can always email us later if there's any other things that come up. If not, I would like to thank all the speakers yet again for their contribution, contributions during the panel discussion. Also the partners, both German Watch and Climate Change Center, ITB. I just see that the answer, sorry, that I was wrong about the question from Azra Putri. That maybe we can answer that quickly. We have 4 minutes left, so we can do that, I think. The question was whether OJK directives are followed by technical assistance to classify green taxonomies. I think this is a question for Desi Adariani, if I'm not mistaken, or if maybe other people such as Tego want to pitch in.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Azahra. Yes. I think because the biodiversity disclosures have been mentioned in the regulation of the Authority of Financial Services, then the biodiversity disclosure index can be used to classify the company based on the green taxonomy that has been developed by the OJK, the authorities. So that I think that it is some kind of the advancing the sustainability report, even though we still hear many many terms such as greenwashing or ESG fraud or something like that. But maybe this is the steps that we have to follow. And I hope that the company reports will be more substantial once the POJK is enacted and applied by all public companies. Yeah, thank you, Floris.
Thank you so much, Desi. All right, then I think now it's time to end. I would like to say that all the slides and other resources used in the presentation will be made available to all the attendees. Also, the Climate Change Center and Climate & Company will be writing a blog post about this webinar and the one that was conducted a week ago. So you can see all the, or can read again, all the interesting contributions that were made by everyone and the panel discussion. Then now I would like to thank everyone for joining. And I wish you a good rest of the day or rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Floris.
Thank you, Floris. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, and thanks a lot. Thank you, Floris.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.